Okay. Welcome everyone. Let's wait a few seconds. I think we can start the introductions. So today on the Halloween night, we are very happy to have Hee Yoon from UCL. The title of the presentation initially was Dynamic Trading and Inference in Non-Markovian Equilibria, but we have a new title, Non-Recursive Dynamic Optimization. This is joint work with Marzena, Rostek, and Xian. Xian is here with us in the audience as well. So if there are any questions, please use chat for clarification and so on. And Xian has kindly agreed to keep an eye on this and address anything if there's anything in the chat. We also have two panelists, Daniel Chen and Piero Gottardi. So we are very happy. Welcome all. Just a reminder that next week we have Fedra Monaco from Yale presenting optimal cohort partitions. Right, thank you very much. And Hee, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and also thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss our paper at the virtual seminar in economic theory. So the paper I will present today, which now have a new title, as Max said, the non-recursive dynamic optimization, which we felt more appropriate than the original title and then less technical. But many apologize for not notifying this one in advance. It's completely on me. So what we consider in this paper is based on the both title implication that we are considering about the dynamic setting, dynamic market. So as we all know that the many market design or the policy questions involve the consideration of the dynamic or recurrent interaction among multiple agents. This is because, like, of course, many trading, production, contract market are naturally dynamic. But modeling a dynamic market with heterogeneous and privately informed agent has been very much challenging because it faces difficulty in applying the traditional recursive method and techniques from the dynamic market. The key challenges arise in the curse of dimensionality, and then the related problem of two-sided learning, and then the forecast of the forecasts of others, and so on. So this figure here, which I will actually revisit later in this talk, so we don't need to like look at all the details yet. This figure shows that actually with the heterogeneity among the participants can lead to the exploding number of the equilibrium objects that we need to endogenize in the model. So to avoid these challenges, to avoid this curse of dimensionality, many studies in the literature has imposed either symmetry or the stationary assumption, in particular based on the Markovian assumption, which motivated our original title, or the stationary equilibrium. But instead of doing that, we actually wanted to consider about this dynamic market with heterogeneity and the non-stationarity. And then we want to understand where this difficulty comes from, and then we want to propose a way to actually resolve this difficulty by considering the new approach to solve the equilibria. So in order to discuss this broad topics of the questions, let me introduce the model, which is the dynamic chrono model for the asset, the trading market. I should clarify, I do not want to falsely claim that we developed this model. This model is a standard, nothing new. Still, I want to illustrate this model, this standard dynamic chrono model, because it's good to have something tangible to fix an idea, to talk about the approach that we want to propose, which is where our contribution belongs to. And then our approach is not really specific to this particular model. Okay, so what kind of a model we want to consider as an example, as a environment. We want to consider the dynamic market where a divisible asset is traded over finite number of round T. So naturally, we are in the non-stationary setting. And then, of course, also there is a risk-free numerator to allow us to trade this risky asset. And there are finite number of large agent, large trader, which each of them are indexed by superscript I. So we are in the oligopoly imperfectly competitive market setting. So each of these trader can influence the market because they are large, they are not negligible. So what they do is that they trade at each round for this risky asset and then receive the payoff, which are quadratic on their asset holdings. So here QI0T is their initial asset holding, risky asset holding at the beginning of a round T. And QIT is their trade at the round. So QI0T plus QIT is the amount of the risky asset they will hold after trade at round T. And their utility is determined based on the mean return theta. And then the convex cost of holding this risky asset. And the convexity is captured by that mu I. We can consider this theta as the literally the dividend or the payoff from holding this asset. Or we can also consider that given that they are large traders, we can consider this one is a fee of intermediating their customers' orders to the market, and then they receive it based on how much of the order he actually provided the trading service. And then the convexity holding cost mu I can be heterogeneous across traders, which is based on their potentially a different outside option, different group of the customers, or the different requirement or regulations that is imposed to different class of the traders. So given this, we have first the heterogeneity across the traders, which is captured by
the payoff is deterministic?
I'm sorry?
The payoff is deterministic.
So the payoff, if we consider about this,
theta mu.
Yes, mu I as a convex holding, the theta is the only thing that is essentially the capturing about the risk asset return. This we are going to assume as a known value to everyone. We can relax this assumption, but just to make everything simple.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so actually the uncertainty is coming from somewhere else, although we can relax it, but let me go to the one special type of the model so that like we can have like a simplest setting here. So where this uncertainty comes from? It comes from, as an example, we model this uncertainty to be in the trader's inventory. So at each round T, each trader receive liquidation shock or inventory shock, which is the EIT. And we model this one as an IID, follow the IID Gaussian distribution, just for simplicity again. We can consider this EIT as the potentially the customer's new selling order that newly arrived today. Or it can actually be considered as idiosyncratic shock that influences a trader's valuation of the risky asset. Either interpretation would be fine, as long as this lead to some shocks to the trader's liquidation need. And then this EIT is the private information. So everyone know their own EIT, but they do not know the others. So we have a private.
So to understand, so how do you want to think of that? This can be viewed like as a liquidity shock?
Yes, yes. I think that's the interpretation that is close to this mathematical setting.
Hee, just a quick question. So the trades, they're market orders. That means that the trade quantity cannot be conditioned on the price at time T. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the main model we are going to talk today. But
Got it.
our approach actually can extend to the setting you just described that allow the traders to submit the limit order as well. There is a little bit of the differences, but what are we going to talk mostly today about, like approach itself, the idea itself actually can apply to that setting as well. Yeah, thank
Got
you.
it. Thanks.
Okay, so again, so the agents are just choosing the quantity they want to trade.
Yes, they are
And
submitting
they
the
are
market
uncertain
order.
about, and they are uncertain about the price because also they are uncertain about the other agent shocks.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but if you were doing price contingent, then they would be able to protect themselves against that.
Partially, yes. If we actually consider the supply function of the contingent demand, they can partially incorporate the information that will be aggregated in the to-be realized prices. Given the heterogeneous setting, that price will not be fully revealing. But yes, the level of the information they would gather will not be exactly same as this model, but as long as it's not fully revealing, the same approach same message that I want to say will carry over.
Well, but it's different, no? Because if I can submit an order contingent on the price, I'm sort of isolating myself about the shock of the other. Right? I'm less dependent on the shock on the other. Here, if I submit an order independent of the price, I don't know the price, and the price depends on the shock of the other. So it is a clearer mechanism.
So yes, I mean let me be precise. The equilibrium, of course, equilibrium like result or the equilibrium equations will be different depending on what types of the strategy we submit. What's important here is that even after trading a certain number of rounds, still there is some uncertainty about the other traders' private information, which is the E-shocks, which maintain with the heterogeneous traders because the price will not be fully revealing about everyone's private information, even when then we are allowing the supply function or the contingent demand. So another way of saying it, we can consider about the contingent price contingent demand model, which will change a little bit of the equation here and there relative to what I will show today. But I want to say that generally the approach we are proposing will apply there as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then let's go back to this model. And then maybe we can discuss a little bit more detail about what actually changes after we talk about the model if we're considering about the contingent orders. So here we are actually considering the setting that the traders submit the market order, they actually submit the quantity orders. So QIT at each round will be the one value. And then collecting everyone's market orders, the price at that round will be determined based on the net demand of all large traders. And then the exogenous, the inverse supply function. We can consider this, the inverse supply function as collected the supply of the retail investors and then which will from the retail investors who are price takers. The assumption we are making here is that BT is strictly positive, so that if the large investors submit the larger demand, if they buy more, then the price increase. And then actually another thing is that traders market order can be positive or negative. So there is no designated buyer or sellers. If the QIT they submit is positive, they are buyer. If it's negative, it's a seller. Okay.
But do you need this exogenous supply?
In order to
Strictly
clear this
speaking, you
market
don't.
order.
Yeah. But you could, as you said, agent can buy or sell, right? So you could clear with zero net trades, no? Without external.
So
supply.
if it's a market order, if it's the order that is uncontingent to the price, we actually need certain pricing rules to clear these orders.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so the alternative is that you said, like we can allow the price contingent order so that we can find a price that makes
No, the alternative could be that the seller, when you have a negative quantity, you put the asset on sale. When you buy, you put the money on the table, and then you determine the price in that way. No, which is more like the sharply should.
So we are not allowing the menus here, but actually what you said can be one interpretation of this pricing rule, I
Right.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So there is
Yep.
designated the seller actually submit this, supply demand. So I think that's another interpretation. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just for clarification, the ATs and BTs are all known in advance.
Yes, we are assuming that for the simplicity, we can actually relax the setting to the uncertain AT.
Mm-hmm.
But like we just wanted to focus on the one single source of the uncertainty.
Okay.
Just for simplicity, yes. Okay. So given this, so let's think about what traders knows at each round. So like let's define the information set. At each round, at the beginning of the round T, all the past prices will be publicly observed. So that's a public information. And then each trader observe their own shocks, endowment shock, EIT. So that's a private information. And of course, they know about their own controls. So there is information set which we denote by HIT. And given this, we consider the perfect Bayesian Nash equilibrium. Each traders optimize their quantities based on their information set. And as we already discussed, the traders do not know other traders' endowment shock. So the state of the world will be characterized by the set of everyone's this endowment shock.
Mm-hmm.
In the equilibrium path.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Yes.
The endowment shocks are IID over time?
Yes, that's a simplification assumption, yes.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, so sorry about in the equilibrium path, given that my orders up to today will be anyway measurable to what I observe up to today, which is the endowment shock and the price, we can actually consider the state variable, which contains my private information and then the public information, which is the minimal set that actually consider that can generate this the information set. And then in this setting, what we can actually immediately observe is that the price is generally neither Markovian nor martingale. The reason is actually quite intuitive because of the heterogeneity across the traders. And then because of the non-stationarity due to the finite number of rounds. Price, which will aggregate everyone's signals up to today, they will assign the heterogeneous weight in front of everyone's shocks, which is time varying across round, heterogeneous across traders, which means that each of the price will convey a different statistic of the state. All price matters. The traders in their inferences about the state, they cannot ignore any past prices. All history matters. So that's why the heterogeneity and non-stationary play a key role. That's the assumption we wanted to capture in this simple setting. Okay.
Jihee, just
Yes.
a clarifying question. So I don't think this is important for what you said. What you said makes a lot of sense. But I was wondering, for the price, does the payoff theta not appear in the price?
So that's a very good point. This should be a typo. Equal should mean the informationally equivalent, not actually level being equivalent. Sorry, it's my bad. Thank you for pointing this one out. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you give an intuition for this memory in the price? Or you're going to discuss this or?
So yes, but like the high-level intuition here is that this weight on the each of the signal, they are determined essentially based on the trader's the value function concavity, which is the risk attitude. Given the traders have the heterogeneity in mu it, that lead to the heterogeneity in the value function concavity, that lead to that this heterogeneous weight across the traders. In addition to that, given that the non-stationarity, given the number of rounds remain is changing over time, how much the information will be aggregated will depend on how close the past shock to the today's price is, so that it actually leads to the time-varying weight as well. So given that there is no proportional or the perfect correlation across the prices, each price matters, and then that break the Markovian property of the prices. I will actually give you like a very detailed example to see this one.
Just to remind me, so the cost that you have is a cost for holding the asset, so it depends on the total holding, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, okay. So I think that I often use the two interpretation mixed. So I said the risk attitude to capture that it's the concavity of the value function, but the source of the concavity actually coming from this quadratic cost. So yeah, I should have said that the heterogeneity in the concavity of the value function, which came from the heterogeneity in the mu I, that's the reason for the heterogeneous weight.
Yeah, I still don't have a clear intuition why the price should depend on the past shocks, because in some sense they depend on the QI0, right? So the QI0 now may depend on the past shock.
So
right?
I will get back to that.
Okay.
Quick answer is that the price is past the prices which aggregate past shock or up to that time shock. They will be incorporated in the trader's demand in the two channel. One is inventory, one is the learning. Inventory basically aggregate the past shocks in a linear way, additive way. The learning actually aggregate the past shocks in a non-linear ways. And then because of that, the dependence on the past shock remain in every prices.
Okay, to put it another way, right? Could I also write the price as a function of the current shock and the current initial holdings, the QI0T?
So that's actually
Probably.
that we cannot. What we can do is that we can write the current price as a function of current inventory, current shock, entire past prices, which is a part of the information set. That's where actually the past shock comes from, like the inventory, and then also the reliance on the past shock to infer about the state that actually include the past shocks in this equation, in these statistics.
You come back to that.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, I will. I think we can discuss it later with a little bit of the details. Okay. So, given this setting, now like we define the equilibrium, and then the remaining work is characterizing it. But before doing that, let me actually explain about the challenges that we discussed briefly with a little bit more of the detail, where this challenge comes from. The key issue here is that the traders actually can influence the market prices because we have oligopoly market, and then that will influences traders' belief about the market. So let's suppose that the trader I deviated at round T. He can influence the price today and also all the future price distributions. That influence everyone's inference about the state. First, other traders now observe these price changes and then think that, oh, this one should have come from someone else's different realization of the state, different realization of the endowment shock. So they infer the state differently by observing these new prices. On the other hand, trader I himself, he knows that he deviated. He knows that the price changes due to the deviation, not about the different realization of the state. So he maintained his belief about the state by using his knowledge about the deviation. In other way of the saying is, he actually updates, he changed his mapping, belief formation mapping from the observed price to the belief of the state. This means that in the off equilibrium, following this one trader's deviation, now there is the information asymmetry due to the knowledge about the past deviation, which did not exist in the equilibrium path. So that lead for the trader, that lead that the trader I have faced a different sub-game on and off equilibrium. Now his optimal strategies off equilibrium, even when he observed exactly the same private information and then public information, his optimal strategy and then his optimal posterior, correct posterior, now they are different from the equilibrium path. Even when he observed exactly the same realization of the public and private information. One caveat I want to say here is that in this divisible asset setting, every prices can be feasible, can be realized in the equilibrium path. This H star, which is a price, and then my own shock, they have a full support. So there is no way for other traders to detect any deviation. So that's actually crucial for creating this asymmetric information, the knowledge of the past deviation to matter. So that lead to that if with these inferences, so that the trader I's deviation now have a power to influence or even manipulate other traders at these dynamic inferences that lead to my own demand changes, best response change in the future. So this is a quite challenging problem because like now what I observe, this state variable is not sufficient. If I construct my demand schedule and then belief formation mapping as a function of this state variable, that is not sufficient because it cannot distinguish on and off equilibrium behavior. And on top, another aspect that why this arises, of course, imperfect competition. If I cannot influence anyone from the beginning, because the market is competitive, or if there is no one to influence anyway, because I am the only player in the market, in that case, the consideration or the challenges would not arise. So both persistent inference and then the imperfect competition, both two features are the reason why these challenges arise. And in terms of the applications, actually, we discussed a little bit about the detailed setting of this dynamic chrono market. And then I mentioned that actually detail would not matter. The reason is this: any market with a persistent information and heterogeneous trader imperfect competition, in those settings, same challenges will arise. And then to avoid these challenges, there has been two classes of the literature that have tried to actually avoid these challenges. One is that one stretch of the literature considered the setting that the private information is either fully disclosed by the maximum level of the transparency or endogenously fully revealing traders the private information. In those cases, essentially the inference becomes short-lived so that we do not need to worry about this issue. Alternative way is that the traders may not maintain the inventory or savings, so there is no dynamic trading consideration. So trading part becomes static. So in those cases also, we can actually avoid these challenges. But if we have both, what should we do? I mean, it's a natural setting. So what should we do? So we want to propose two methods. One, recursive method that we actually extend the existing recursive method, dynamic programming. Another one is new alternative approach. Actually, we call non-recursive approach. So let's first consider about the recursive approach. The issue was there is persistent inference. The price was non-Markovian, so that this dynamic inference actually created difficulties. Then let's enlarge, let's change the state variable into something else. That can be a one way to go. If the state variable that include the prices, if because of its non-Markovian property, it created difficulties, so we can consider a different set of the state variable that is not price. We can actually do that by having a trader's belief on the state directly as a state variable. This is, I think, a natural way of extending the set of the state variable. And given that this is conditional expectation, this is a belief about the state, naturally this is a Markov process. But there is another thing we need to consider. My deviation influences others' belief. My deviation matter for my best response and posteriors. I need to change those things after following my deviation. So how we can actually capture this effect of my deviation? By having belief on the other's belief. We are going to keep track of additional belief process, which captures about others' belief. In equilibrium path, these two beliefs will coincide. So it's actually the redundant information in equilibrium path. Off equilibrium, they will be different because based on the past deviation, now we have the information asymmetry in off equilibrium subgame. So by having this additional object, which is again Markovian still, but it can be different from my own belief, now we can each trader can keep track of the effect of his past deviation. This is awesome. We have a Markovian property, which can actually Markovian state variables, and then it can actually allow each trader to keep track of all the deviation, whatever happened in the past. So trader does not need to actually care about what he did in yesterday or in the past. What he cares about is just today's realization of this belief and the belief differences that allow us to actually apply the usual dynamic programming, which lead to that we can actually simplify the problem, dynamic problem, into the sequence of the static problem, given this realization of the Markovian state variable, and then given today's value function. And then the fixed point between the value function and belief will be round by round, node by node, how my demand actually influences tomorrow's belief, how my demand influenced the previous value function. So problem becomes actually much simpler by using this Markovian non-price state variables. Yes, Piero.
Just a quick question. So the beliefs exactly are about, just to understand the notation. So the beliefs that I have are about
this state,
the beliefs that I care at any point in time. I need to have a belief about the history of the shock, or is it enough to have a belief about the total holdings of the agent?
It's a history of the shock. So this actually go back to our discussion. Each prices or which lead to my return of the asset will aggregate all the past shock differently. So I actually need to know that what's the real state, so that I need to actually make a belief about each of this endowment shock of others.
But wouldn't it be enough to have a bit in terms of payoff relevant for the future? Isn't it enough to have a belief about the quantity held by the agent at date?
So
Down?
we actually, originally that was what we guessed as well. But if we have actually, they just say about everyone's inventory today, shouldn't that be enough? But in fact, that's not the case. The reason is that in the traders' behavior actually coming from the two sources of the trading need, which is about the inventory consideration and also the inference about the future prices, and then the inference about the future prices actually that inference depend on all the past prices, so that how others will interpret about the past prices and then translate that into the future prices through this state actually matters. So that's the reason. So the QI, unfortunately, it is very probably there is some settings that allow us to focus on the belief on the QI0T, in particular if the information is short-lived. We know that the learning about the inventory only would be sufficient. But if there is the inference, which is persistent inference, unfortunately, that's not the case. Yeah, so this is basically the fundamental uncertainty, and then we need to make inferences in the most general cases, potentially some simplistic settings, as I mentioned, like the short-lived information, maybe the set of the state variable can be reduced further, but generally, we cannot guarantee.
Can I try to see if I think you've just said, you already answered the question I'm about to ask, but just to check whether I can phrase it in other words and see if that's correct. So here you have these deviations that you cannot observe because they're always compatible with prices are always compatible with some shock.
Right.
So essentially, you know that you deviated, so you're gonna have your beliefs about what's gonna happen after your deviation, and you gotta keep track of those.
Yes.
And the reason you don't have to worry about beliefs about your beliefs, so the infinite hierarchy of beliefs and so on, is that because in equilibrium, no deviation is observed, these guys, by definition of PBE, are forced to use Bayesian updating. And so basically, it's as if they never think you deviate. This is what allows you to make this tractable, because otherwise, with other notions that are not Bayesian or something like that, you'd be in trouble because this thing would be intractable. Is that what we're saying essentially?
Yeah, that's a good point. So like because we can easily create the belief about others' belief exactly because of what you said. Like everything has a pull support. I know that others believe that we are still in the equilibrium path. So I know what the belief updating they were going to do following the Bayesian. But if there is some holes in this support, now we face like additional difficulties that actually this approach cannot fully captures. Yeah, probably need a different kind additional potentially a state variable or other technique would be needed. Yes. So thank you so much for all the comment. So I think I convinced you that this recursive approach itself, and then like it's nice enough considering about this Markovian state variable, and then considering this full support, we can do just a belief on the other's belief. No need to worry about like additional hierarchies and so on. But still, if we consider actually the dimensionality, which was the initial motivation, this state variable, this enlarged state variable still has huge dimensionality. In particular, if we consider about this transition matrix of the belief, we have the order of I squared. And the same for the value function Hessian matrix as well. And then we want to consider the heterogeneous traders and non-stationary setting. There is another like complexity. So the total dimensionality of this approach actually can explode if there is finite but still many traders, and then the finite but still many trading rounds. In particular, for example, if we have 3 rounds of the trading, which is not sufficient, it's very short cases, with a 10 large agent, we have like 2,000 number of the equilibrium object we need to endogenize. And the number is exploding in both dimension, I and T. So this is an issue. Maybe recent technical advantage, like a development, may allow us to use the brute force of the improving the hardware and then tackle this problem. Maybe that's one way of a solution. But we want to we want to discuss the alternative approach, which allow us to less worry about the question of dimensionality.
So in the graphs, you're just showing the dimensionality of the state space, right? So that's what it is there.
This is the number of the equilibrium object that we need to endogenize. So which actually link to the number of the state variables. So the count is actually the demand coefficient, which given that the state variable has certain number of the size, we have like a coefficient in front of it. In addition to that, the value function coefficient is also included, I think.
And to get a sense about this number, so now with the t equal to 3, so these are the numbers come, I must have beliefs about, right? In the last period, I must have beliefs about for every possible price.
With t equal to 3, the maximum number of the input variable that I have will be the last round. And then I have 3 private information. And then I have my belief about the other shocks, which is the 3 multiplying number of traders. And then I double up because I need to keep track of the belief of the others' belief. And then that create the maximum number of the state variable. And then we have corresponding the demand coefficient number, and then transition metrics variables, and then the value
It depends
function.
how you count, because these are beliefs for every possible price.
Yes, yes.
So which price are you considering? The price on path, it can be infinitely many. So how do you?
So
the numbers that you have is the belief along one sequence, right? It's not for a given set of price realization, which is 2, right, at day 3. Is that what? Just to get a sense about the numbers.
Sorry. So this belief can be a function of the prices.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of keeping track of the realization, what we do is keeping the count and the coefficient in this belief formation function. So for each of these conditional expectation, at the last round, we observe 2 prices from the past. So we have intercept and then coefficient in front of P1, coefficient in front of P3, P2, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So recursive method, I think like we have a clear pros and cons. Like we can use the dynamic programming, the usual like recursive method, which is very nice, but it has a curse of dimensionality. So alternatively, what we can do, if the curse of dimensionality is what we want to actually having a huge difficulty about, which is true, instead of that, instead of actually having the large dimension, let's consider a way to reduce this dimension by relaxing the recursivity of the equilibrium characterization method. That's our proposal for the next method. So what we do in non-recursive approach is that on a high level, there's 2 ideas. One, do we really need to keep track of this belief about the state? Instead of making a belief about the state, let's make a belief about the future prices. But given that the price is generally not Markovian, now you're losing the fact that this belief being Markovian. So we are reducing the number of the belief we need to create in exchange of the losing the Markovian belief, Markovian state variables. I personally would like to say that this is reasonable. Like as a single traders, do I really care about all the population distribution of other traders' inventory and then other traders' belief? Do I really care about it? Maybe what I care about is just what I anticipate about the future prices, future price distribution, which is a payoff relevant object only. Another idea is that in the recursive method, we need to actually have to maintain about this extra set of the belief on the other's belief to take into account about all the possible node, all the possible paths in this entire game to incorporate the differences between the on and off equilibrium. Instead of doing that, what we want to do is that we want to focus on the equilibrium path behavior and posterior only, and then want to consider about the marginal changes nearby. And that would be sufficient for the equilibrium characterization. But in order to do that, we actually lose recursive backward induction, because recursive backward induction allows us to consider any subgames. Instead of doing that, we consider the non-recursive approach by considering the marginal changes of the strategies and the belief around the equilibrium path only. So what does it exactly mean? So in the standard imperfect competitive setting, people has been considered about in the literature based on the Klamper-Meyer and the Kyle 89, the equilibrium problem can be reduced in the sense that the traders actually consider the residual market, all others demand, through one single parameters, which is the price impact. So if a single trader actually knows what's the equilibrium price distribution and then the marginal change of the price following his deviation, that's a sufficient information about the residual market in their game against the others. They do not need to know the others' individual demand, their belief, their utility function. They do not need to know anything about it. Similarly to that, let's consider this dynamic problem, dynamic best response problem, as a game against my future self. What do I need to know is what's my future self equilibrium demand strategy, and then what will be the marginal change of my strategy if I deviate today. So considering reducing this residual market of others, residual market of my future self into this minimum information, by considering that we do not really need to worry about all the arbitrary subgames, we can focus on the equilibrium path, and then that's sufficient. We prove that that's sufficient for the equilibrium characterization. Okay, so that's a general high level like sales pitch of this non-recursive approach we propose. So instead of the maintaining the recursivity, we relax that aspect. And then what we get benefit out of it is we reduce the curse of dimensionality significantly.
Can I just rehearse something in my head? So what you are changing, the proposal here to go to non-recursive, that's not a change of the solution concept.
No.
That's just a change of what exactly? Of the solution method?
Yes.
Of the same object that before.
So we are still focusing on the perfect Bayesian Nash equilibrium. We do not change anything about the equilibrium concept. What we do is how we actually characterize them. Yes. So as you said, it's a methodological aspect.
But the solution concept, it's also the same object. So it depends in principle. So the histories are the same. You don't change histories or anything like that.
So, okay. So what I observe from the game is stay the same. maybe I should have been a little bit more careful here. We technically changed the input variable of the strategies. So this recursive method, considering the each trader's strategy and belief formation as a function of this object, which allow us to consider about the recursive approach, like a dynamic programming and the recursive methodology could survive. On the other hand, what we are going to do in non-recursive method is we consider the strategy as a function of state variable, which is private and public information directly. So there is no transformation of the strategy into a function of something else. We just maintain that. And then we are going to calculate, we are going to characterize that function using the non-recursive methodologies. And we indeed show that these two different functions actually have a one-to-one mapping. So the equilibrium is equilibrium coincide. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I should have said that actually.
Yeah, but you still, yeah, maybe you're going to explain that soon, no? Because I still need to, what I care in terms of payoff is what is going to be the impact of my trade on my current and future prices, right?
Yes, yes.
Right, so the recursive approach was a way to do that.
In the
right?
recursive
Recursive
approach,
way, but in the non-recursive way, I still care about the same object, right? To define the optimal strategy.
so in the non-recursive cases, we are going to talk about it. The key object, equilibrium object, indeed, as you said, is how I influence about the price, how I influence about the future trade. Recursive approaches, in the end, that's payoff relevant, but recursive approach is slightly different because my strategy and the belief formation is a function of the belief, like the enlarged space. So there, the equilibrium objective will be characterized based on how I'm influencing these enlarged state variables. And then we need to also know how that is translated into this payoff relevant object.
Yeah, because the strategy is a function of belief, and my impact depends on the strategy of the others, which is a function of their beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So
you are actually perfectly describing
everything.
about our proof of the equivalence.
Okay.
Can I just point to the time? We have less than 10 minutes officially, and I see the slides at the bottom. We are almost halfway through. But we can, given the number of questions, we can eat into the Q&A session at the end a little bit, so we shouldn't worry too much, but still there's a time, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. A little bit of the extra time would be appreciated. I will try not to go too long. Okay, so far we discussed about like the kind of high level ideas about the non-recursive approach. Let me be a little bit more specific. What's the step to do this non-recursive approach? So let's start with each kind of equation we need to consider to characterize equilibrium. Of course, FOC is one of them. And then as we discussed, endogenizing about this impact on the price, impact on the trade is another object. So let's look at the FOC. When I introduced the non-recursive approach, I said we are not going to actually considering about all the subgames. We are going to actually focus on the equilibrium path and around it only. What does that mean? We are going to consider the FOC as a usual way, but assuming that when we consider the optimization of the time t demand, up to time t, there was no deviation. We are on the equilibrium path. So all the past prices that I observe, we are going to assume that follow the equilibrium price distribution. So there is no informational asymmetry between me and others in this FOC. And given that, we are going to do usual, and we are going to equalize the marginal utility and marginal payment, take into account that how my deviation, today's deviation, which is the first deviation that ever happened, how my deviation influences the price, and then my future demand. And this one is the accumulated future demand, so how my deviation influences time S inventory and how that influences the marginal utility. So this is the FOC following a deviation at time t, assuming that that's the first time that deviation happens. And the second, we need to actually endogenize how I'm gonna adjust my future demand following this deviation. How we're gonna do that? Naturally follow the sequential rationality. Optimization at the future round must hold even after my deviation at time t. So by considering essentially an envelope theorem, the future optimization still remains to hold. Following my deviation, we can characterize what should be the right adjustment in the future for my future substrate. One caveat here, this differentiation may look weird to some of you. Okay, optimization in the future is the conditional expectation being zero. Why the differentiation is only inside? Usually switching the order of the differentiation and the conditional expectation, that's not possible. Why we do that? This is to capture the fact that I know my own deviation. By separating the price that play a role as a payment, which is captured inside of the conditional expectation through this, and then the price that is captured in the conditioning variables that influences my belief, by treating them separately, this is the part that actually played exactly the same role as in the belief difference in the recursive approach. I do not update my belief about the state, even though I observe the different price. I know that I will do that in the future. But payment will be different following the deviation. So here, capturing about my demand adjustment based on the payment changes, but maintaining the belief as the same as before the deviation, or updating the belief mapping, even though I see the different price, I should recover the same state. So
Got it.
that's the most important part.
So you're saying you can put the derivative inside the expectation because you're aware of your own deviations, so you kind of already account for that.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So this is very cool to me, this approach, because you're saying that it suffices just to look at one-shot deviations along the equilibrium path of play to determine equilibrium strategies. And like if you take the recursive approach, you have to look at deviations at every point in the state space. So that's quite a bit more complicated. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
So this kind of reminds me of like the stochastic maximum principle a little bit, because there you only need to, characterize optimal trajectories, strategies along the equilibrium path of play. I think usually there, though, you lose some information relative to the recursive, the dynamic programming approach, because you only characterize solutions along the equilibrium path. I'm wondering here, you mentioned there's this bijection from your recursive formulation of strategies and the non-recursive one. Does that mean you don't lose any information? Basically, once you solve for this non-recursive representation of strategies, you can convert it back to the recursive one? Is that correct?
Yes, so the equivalence is indeed what you said is correct. Actually, if we literally just interpret this FOC and then the characterization of this demand impact, it is indeed focusing on the equilibrium path only. But for the equivalence proof, what we showed is that actually this information, this optimal deviation and the equilibrium path strategy and belief is sufficient to reverse engineer the recursive approach, the demand and the belief.
So that's super cool to me, because like you can really simplify the computation of these equilibria by using this non-recursive approach. And then if you want to, you can just, because there's fewer endogenous demand coefficients you need to compute, and then you can just convert it back to the recursive formulation where maybe things are a little more interpretable. You don't really lose anything. So I think that's very neat.
Thank you. That's cool. Yeah, that's actually a cool comment. Yes, thank you. Yeah,
what I'm missing just very quickly is what happened to all this Right. So here, as you said, you focus on the one-step deviation, right? But as you said before, the problem was that the deviation, the consequence for the future of the deviation, right? So I'm missing, where is that?
So this one-step deviation does not necessarily means that I deviate today and then not deviating future. Here, actually, when I deviate at time t, what I should do is that I need to anticipate, forwardly plan about today and then follow-up deviation. And that's sufficient. So here, indeed, the change of the future trade is optimally determined based on the sequential rationality in the future round. And then when I deviate at time two, I already take into account about that. And then my marginality and marginal payment is characterized in that way. So it's a deviation, in some sense, it's a deviation in the direction. That's why we are calling this one optimal direction of deviation. I am forwardly planning optimal deviation from today and the future. Okay. So that's it. That's the best response part. Again, this is considering about the equilibrium path, around equilibrium path deviation. That is starting from time t and then optimal adjustment in the future. And the remaining part to actually close the equilibrium characterization is, okay, this is the best response problem where the equilibrium is. Equilibrium loop will be characterized based on the market clearing condition and then correct demand and then the belief of others, which will be summarized in similar way, price distribution, and then the marginal change of the price. So this price impact is characterized following my deviation, how the prices today and all the future would changes. First, how in terms of especially in terms of the intertemporal price impact, the interesting things happening here, because I know how I'm gonna change following my planned deviation in the future. That's one aspect. But another aspect is how other traders' demand would react based on the price changes between time t to tau. Important thing is actually my reaction and others' reaction will be different. My reaction, as we saw before, this is based on how my price payment will changes, and then I optimally decide without concerning about the belief perturbation. On the other hand, other traders, they think that they are in the equilibrium world. So how they change it is that instead of updating or to change their demand function, what do they do is, okay, just say, observe the different realization of the input variable, which is the price. And then following already predetermined equilibrium path demand and adjust their quantity realizations. And then that will be captured in this intertemporal price impact. So this is the entire steps of the characterizing the best response and equilibrium. The one difficulty is relative to recursive approach is of course that we need to basically assume that we are on the equilibrium path when we consider about the FOC at time t, which means that I need to assume about the past optimal best response as well. This creates the forward and backward loop of the fixed point problem for the entire round at the same time. There is no recursive or the sequence of the small chunk of the fixed point problem as in the recursive method. We need to actually solve the entire round at the same time. But thankfully, we can actually solve this non-recursive huge fixed point problem in a very limited, with a very small number of the object, because this price impact or equivalently the optimal adjustment of each trader's demand, they are sufficient statistic over the equilibrium. Entire equilibrium fixed point problem for the time 0 to time t for all heterogeneous traders can be solved as a non-recursive fixed point problem for a profile of the price impact dynamics or equivalently profile of this forwardly planned deviation. And then rest, equilibrium price distribution, their inference, their demand coefficient, and so on, they can be all characterized as a function of this object. Okay, so the given time, I actually have like 7 more pages with the very details about like how exactly this inventory and inference influence, and then what what kind of the market prediction we can get out of it. I would have loved to talk about it, but I think I need to wrap it up. So let me conclude. So this, the dynamic model with heterogeneous traders with the private information, especially when I am not perfectly sure what's your belief, my belief, and then you can create a huge like forecast of the forecast of the forecast of the others. This problem is very challenging. We propose the 2 method, which is recursive, which is more natural extension of the existing method, and the non-recursive method. They lead to the different set of different style of the equilibrium characterization methodologies. We want to emphasize that actually the non-recursive method is the methodology we can come up with that reduce the curse of dimensionality into the minimum level, because it used the state variable, which basically impossible to eliminate, whatever I observe privately, publicly. So this actually allow us to work with the minimal set of the state variable that require to characterize the perfect Bayesian equilibrium. So lead to the least level of the curse of dimensionality. Okay, thank you so much for a great comment. Sorry for not managing the time well, but hopefully we can discuss further.
That's fine. It's our fault. Thank you very much. Okay, so Piero and Daniel, any last comments, maybe sort of a bird's eye view or questions?
Yeah, overall, I thought it was very interesting, very nice talk. There are so many applications. Like I guess Piero mentioned at the start, I think so the theta was that was common knowledge to all the traders, right?
In this, yes,
I
in
think
this simple example, yes. Model, yes.
it would be interesting to study a model where you could also add in some private signals about the assets cash payoffs. I think the same difficulty, like that makes that problem hard, is this dynamic inference effect. And so it seems like your methodology should apply for that. And I think there are a lot of interesting questions, like what is the speed at which traders learn about the fundamental information people have and things like that. And yeah, that would be an interesting to explore in your setup.
Yes.
For example, the Du and Zhu 2017 paper, they have this combination of private information about asset payoffs as well as endowment shocks. But to get tractability, they have to assume that the aggregate endowment of traders is kind of common knowledge. And I think your setup should be able to relax that simplifying assumption. And anyway, I thought it was cool, and it's a question I've thought about, like how do you discern between trades that try to discern whether trades are because of fundamental information or just liquidity shocks, and how that affects equilibrium and things like momentum and stuff. I think that could be an interesting direction to explore using your setup.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am very glad that actually you mentioned this one, because today I presented like a simplest one with a commonly known theta, but indeed we actually explore the setting with uncertain theta or theta I with arbitrary correlation across the traders. In fact, Xian actually have implemented the numerical code to actually solve such a setting as well with like arbitrary correlation, and then we look at the how the heterogeneity that arises due to the asset valuation or the heterogeneous correlation in the asset valuation versus heterogeneity in the risk aversion, whether we actually can look at this some different market prediction. That's something that actually we It's in the progress of the looking at it, and then yeah, my amazing co-author Xian have all the tools to actually answer the questions. So I'd be happy to actually update you and discuss further with you regarding that aspect.
Well,
Thank you.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be the case where the traders have private information over theta.
Yes, yes.
That would be the case, right?
Yeah.
And then you can learn about the price also
Yes,
to
exactly.
decompose the
Yeah.
idiosyncratic versus the aggregate.
Yeah, so it's not just about like I mean I present today is like independent shock, but about the uncertainty about the theta, so learning about theta, my theta, others theta, that will actually create much richer inference setting. So that would be very exciting to look at further. Yeah.
Yeah, but just one, yeah, I would like to go through the details and to understand better, but just to get again a general picture in terms of summary. So the basic idea is that you're working on this price impact, right? So the expectation of a pricing for yourself and the impact on the trades of the other, right? So these are the statistics that you use to compute the optimization.
Yes.
And you're pinning down this pricing, this impact on trades and prices through the first order condition of the agents.
Yes. So the first order condition, and then essentially another differentiation of the FOC. Yes.
Right, which is to see precisely how you are. And the beliefs are sort of all embedded into this
so the
beliefs about the price impact about the others, right? So as you said, like in that expression, right? If you essentially you're computing the dqj over dqi.
Yes.
So that is implicit the beliefs, but you don't need to figure out what are the beliefs. You just care about these terms, right? These are local.
Yes, in the end, the equilibrium fixed point problem narrowed down into the fixed point about this object only. Everyone's, yeah.
Francesco, you had a hand up.
Yes, I'm probably going to embarrass myself by asking this question, but who cares? I've done it before, so it's okay. So I was trying to think about the limits of this. To what extent is this? At a high level, and this is where I might be saying something which is wrong. It seems to me that basically you're really relying on this thing that what you care about is an aggregate, aggregate demand in particular. You have this, the price is determined by aggregate demand. So we don't really need to know anybody's individual demand. We just, and so on. You also need this kind of full support of the equilibrium outcomes. So we discussed that, right? Because if you don't have that, neither the recursive nor the other method will work, I suppose. But so am I right that, and of course, there are plenty of environments where the aggregate is fine. Am I right that if you can't rely on the aggregate, then things, you really cannot do much about this, right? That, if you really were to have these goods are, for example, heterogeneous, it's not the same buying for, then I would have problems and I wouldn't be able to use a methodology like this. I'm just trying to sort of see to what extent this is generalizable.
Okay. So regarding sorry. Sorry about that. Indeed, the framework we are currently considering is that, I mean, this is a standardized asset. Only thing we care about is the quantity that we are going to get. And then the overall price will, as you said, reveal about what's the aggregate net demand for it. I haven't thought about actually applying whether it's either of this method can be applied to the for instance, like individual goods, but it has like a different kind of qualities or something like that. I wonder if this Q can be interpreted as a quality, and then like if as long as the quality or the differentiation of the good is a continuum. But like if it's discrete, yeah, that's I think like a little bit different problem. I do not know how to adjust this approach for that setting. Yeah, it's interesting to think about it.
I mean, just to also point out that nobody, well, you've solved what seems to be a dimensionality problem, which we didn't know how to handle before. So there's no criticism here, right? It's just
no, thank you. I mean,
I'm trying to work out what's the limit of this. But yeah, it's yes, there's a lot of applications where I can see how this is an acceptable. All the assumptions you make are quite acceptable.
Thank you.
Can
Yeah.
I use this opportunity to finish the official part of the
Okay.
presentation? So thank you very much for joining us today.